Sonlight sends a lot of maps. When you start working or start using Sonlight, you'll notice a lot of maps, and I'm gonna say hi to a few people joining us right now. That's fun. So I'm not here all by myself. So I will talk about maybe the why of maps when I'm done talking about just the practical stuff of the maps. That way, if you're just tuning in to figure out what's going on, you'll know. So in your instructor's guide, every instructor's guide that Sonlight has comes with a little map like this, a miniature map, okay? And it will be 3-hole punched. I always take mine out and put it in a separate folder so that my daughter and I can refer to it often. And if you have an IG in front of you to look at, I'll show you mine, and hopefully I can do this. Every day, you'll find little things marked in here. So my daughter and I are on our second week of level J. We're doing History of Science this year. And so right here on our second day, there's a map point, and there's going to be those little map points. And that little globe is to tell you that there's a map point. So I'm going to find on day 2 of that week, down here, well, day 1 and day 2, but here we go. You'll find in your notes sections something that looks like this with a little note. Wow, have you guys ever tried to do this backwards? It's really complicated. Okay, so there's a mapping point here, okay, and it will say, oh, Aegean Sea, Ionia. Over here, I'm going to give you an example here. It says Athens, Greece, because we're reading about Thales and the Greeks. And so it says Athens, Greece, H7 on map 1. And what that means is that I'm going to go to this little guy, and I'm going to find map 1, and H7. So just like you would read a normal map, here's H, here's 7 up here, and so I cross it, and there is Greece and Athens. There they are. Okay, so as my daughter and I read, I do have this map with me, and almost anytime we talk about a place, I grab it and we just make sure we know where we are. For instance, we were talking about Ionia, and that was an area of Turkey, not anymore, but it was on the western coast of Turkey. So I just want to make sure, okay, look, Sweet Pea, we're talking about this area in Greece, okay? Oh my word. You guys are going to get sick watching this because I can't figure out what I'm doing. Okay, so hopefully that answers the question of, okay, the small miniature map, you're going to have mapping points on your study guide, on your instructor's guide, sorry, and it's going to tell you what map it is and all of that right in the notes, okay? And that is for almost all levels. I'm not sure about pre-K and preschool. I said that all Sonlight levels, but at least from A up, K up, they will have maps. Then the next thing you should have gotten, but it's optional, so you don't have to buy it, but it certainly is a real treasure for you to have all through schooling. It's a one-time purchase, and it's this Markable Map. And the deal with the Markable Map is it has 2 sides, okay? So you've got this side with the whole Earth, and then on the back, you have just the United States. Okay, so I'm going to give you a recommendation, and it's something I did early on in my Sonlight years, and that was that I bought 2. And I'm not trying to make more money for Sonlight. That is not what I'm trying to do. But I found it really helpful, especially because I was always doing more than one level at a time. I feel that most of my homeschooling journey, I've had 3 levels going simultaneously until I started graduating some people. This is my first year to have only 1 level since my very first was in kindergarten. So I had multiple levels going, so I bought 2 Markable Maps, and I kept 1 hanging up on my wall all the time on the American side, and 1 hanging up on my wall all the time in world. So somebody's asking me, how big is the big map? Okay, so here I am. Here it is. How can I tell you this? Let's see. I would say it's almost 3 feet across. That's almost a yard wide this way, and about 2 feet this way, widthwise. Okay, so does that help give you kind of an idea? It's not quite as big as the map at the back of my head. And if I push you away from me, I just don't want to do too much. My phone will fall and it'll be a disaster here. But anyway, so this is the map. When you are finding something, so with my 8th grader, we haven't done this yet, if that gives you any indication. But with my 8th grader, I am planning on having her find this area of the world that we're talking about. So you also get a wet erase marker, and here we go, right? So here's Greece in this area. So see, I just circled it. Okay, and that's all you're gonna have your kids do. Or, look, we're studying this area. I'm gonna have her, let's label the Mediterranean Sea. I wanna make sure you know where it is. Maybe you can make it a kind of a fun game. So somebody's asking me, we don't have the wall space for hanging. Can it just always be folded up and pulled out? For sure, you absolutely could do that. Let me give you another idea. Although I don't know how practical this would be. For a long time, I had maps on my dining room table, and I covered them with a sheet of a little bit heavier plastic from Joann's, and I had to, Joann's or Michael's or wherever you can get your cloth, things like that. So I would go there and get a decently thick piece of plastic and lay it over my maps, and those get kind of grungy after a while, so I would have to change that out. But that was, oh my word, a conversation piece. My kids, we had the best discussions over dinner talking about that map. And I would have, half the table had a world map on it, half the table had a United States map. And it was really fun when we would pray for missionaries, we would figure out where they were. Anything that we were hearing on the news, we would find it out. So the one thing about the wall space, for the person asking me about that, yes, I think it would be valuable, and you could still have it maybe for your little people. You lay it on the floor even and find the places. The only thing is you'll probably want to clean it off every time before you fold it up, or maybe not, since it's wet erase. It shouldn't smudge, I don't think. I mean, obviously if it gets wet, it'll smudge, but that might be. You might find if you don't have the space that for now, this part, this map might be all you need, but I found this to be super, super valuable resource for us. And so I brought up the table idea just thinking, oh, I wonder if you could leave it on the table and cover it that way. Even moms, you say you don't have space on your walls, but even if you put it in an out of the way place, like what about in a laundry room wall? What about on a bathroom wall, a kid's bathroom wall, in somebody's bedroom? And then you just take a little field trip to the map whenever you need to mark it. I would get creative with that because I love maps and I love the value that they add to our homeschooling journey. So I think that answers that question, right? So the maps in the IG are marked already. You can find them, you can point out places. It tells you exactly where you'll find them. They correspond with the map points in your instructor's guide. And then I would find those places on your instructor's guide map, and then I would take the time to mark them on here. Especially when your kids are little, because they won't fight you about this. They think it's so, so fun. Especially as little as you can, starting out, even in preschool and pre-K, having a markable map, anytime a place comes up, let's say you're reading a story and it's set in Chicago or New York, and you say, hey, let's find that on the map. Anytime there's any place that's brought up, find it on the map. Just take a second, and it doesn't have to be a long drawn out process. When my kids were very little, I had this book. I mean, I still have it, but when they were little, I actually used it. Now it just kind of sits somewhere. I bought an atlas of the world, so you could get something like this, and instead of hauling them off to the map to mark something every time, I also would have this, and anytime there was a place we would look it up in our atlas, right? So I'm always really intrigued by the Middle East or by India. And so you can find whatever. Oh, here's India, okay? So I would pull this out of India and we would find the place that we were talking about, okay? So anything like that that can just enrich their understanding of where they are in the world and be interested in the places of the world. I think anything you can do to add value and make it super hands-on, and your kids will learn so much geography just naturally learning. Another thing that I would recommend to you is a globe. And it doesn't have to be something super duper expensive and fancy. You know what? I think my grandmother bought this for me one Christmas after I was a homeschool mom. I said, you know what? I really need a globe, so I'll get it for you. That was her Christmas present. I think it cost her like $15 because look, this is cheap plastic, but it's a globe. And globes are so fantastic because maps don't give the complete picture, do they? Maps are, well, maybe not all of you realize this, but maps are flattened out, and so they take the sphere part away, and so things are actually much bigger on a globe than they sometimes appear to be, or they're smaller than they appear to be. For instance, our maps often kind of skew how large Africa is. We think it's large, but Africa is enormously bigger than the United States or even South America. But on the map, it looks a little bit comparable, but it's not. Okay, so that's another thing I would recommend to you is considering buying a globe. That's a great use of time, and that you can set kind of anywhere in your house. Yank it out. Okay, let me answer a couple questions that got dropped in here earlier. At what point do you need to start using the maps? SLT 103, I know you have a name, but I didn't want to divulge it because that's what you have on your in our app. So at what point do you need to start using the maps? Always? Seriously, what point do you need to? Don't look at this like it's school, I have to include the maps and beat yourself up for it. Don't look at it as that. Look at it as the joy of watching the discovery, okay? And again, I'm not recommending using the maps in order to add more things onto your life. I'm saying just incorporate it naturally. Have this map there. At the very least, be referring to this one. Okay, so at the very least, refer to this one. I think when my children were 3rd grade and younger, let me even say 4th grade, 4th, 5th, especially when you're going through the United States, up through when you're going through United States history for the first times, levels D and E, I love having the Markable Map to refer to. So I think from the get-go, moms, if you can start using this kind of map, or you see what I have back here on the wall, that's just a map I bought. I have one of, here, let me turn you a little bit. I have one of the world and one of the United States, okay? So I have those, and those are labeled. You don't mark those. Those are already labeled, although I guess I could mark them. Actually, I have marked them. Once we had a bunch of missionary kids over, and so I said, where did you grow up? Can you show us on the map? Oh my word, you would have thought I handed them the biggest present. It was such a joy to them to find where they grew up on the map, to show the other MKs and our family. This is where I grew up. When you have people in your home, especially if they're not from the United States, do that. It makes them feel so special. You meet someone from India, ask where they grew up. India is a huge country with a ton of states, and they're not the same. It's like if you say you grew up in Michigan compared to growing up in Texas, it's completely different, right? And we know that because we live in the United States. But if you're from India, we don't know where India is India. It's not. And that's true of every country. So anyway, you can use maps in such a multitude of ways. But I would say start using them early on, especially when you've got young ones. just to acclimate them to what a map is, to where their place in the world is, to open up their minds to the fact that there are people all over the world who live in such different places. Another question Tara asked on the app was, she said she has 2 kids in the same level. How do you utilize the small map when you've got 2 kids? And that she currently sits in between them and points out the places on the map. That's perfect, Tara. That's exactly right. You're incorporating it, you're doing it, you're making it work for your 2 people. That's exactly the best thing to do. You can come do the live, okay? Because that is the exact thing to do. And then as far as the big map, if you have 2 people, use 2 different markers. Let them take turns, or say, okay, this one gets to do it today, this one gets to do it tomorrow, or make a game out of it and have one close their eyes and maybe put something over or be around the corner, and one gets to mark it with his blue marker, and then you say, yay, yeah, you did it, and erase that, and then have the other one come with his green marker and gets to mark it, and yay, yeah, you did it, and then the 2 of them together can do something. So I think you can do that, and Tara, I think what you're doing is great, and you just keep that up. That's perfect. And then lastly, I had a question on Facebook from Gayla McKinney, and she said, how make it work for me in high school. How does it work in high school? Okay, this is why I said really emphasize this when the kids are little and get them interested and acclimated, because sometimes in high school, just the demands of all the other stuff that you're doing takes away from the Markable Map part. I found that to be true in our home. So this has been what we mostly worked on in high school. Again, please don't beat yourself up. There is not anyone who's going to show up at your house and say, are you using your Markable Map for high school? Nobody's going to do that, okay? You don't have to use the Markable Map. It is meant to be a resource to help, to enrich, to encourage. If you've been a Sonlight person for a long time and have used maps for a long time, by the time you get to high school, you might not need it as much. But these, I think, are key and constantly pointing back. If you have a map hanging anywhere in your home for quick, easy reference. Oh, Jake, yeah, that's in Myanmar. Do you actually remember where Myanmar is? Let's see if we can find it. Okay, so that sort of thing you can be doing all the time. So I hope that is helpful. I haven't noticed other questions in here. Let me say this too. Wow, time flies when we're on this live, at least for me. I don't know how it's doing for you, but okay, so a couple top things. Hang them where they're accessible. Hang maps where they're accessible, okay? So, and the one mom who wrote in and said, what do I do if I don't have the wall space? Again, I would say get creative, maybe a laundry room, maybe a closet, maybe the back of some kind of door, maybe in the bathroom, there in the child's bedroom, in the child's closet, if it's big enough to house something like that. I would find some place, but yes, if you need to fold it up, that's fine. And then using these, finding the map points on your IG, all of that. Surround your kids with maps. And the why, without getting incredibly philosophical about this, I think that the why is so that you and I and our children understand our place in the world. There are so many of us who grew up just thinking that the United States was all there is. And it reminds me of, maybe I'm dating myself a little bit, but this movie is old even for me. It came out way before I was born. The King and I, right? The musical The King and I. There's a scene where she's trying to teach the children about where the kingdom of Siam is, and they have a map, and Siam is like, you know, this big, and the rest of the world is tiny and huddled around it. And then she shows them a real map, and the king's, you know, the prince heir is very upset about that. That is not true, you're lying, you know, the Siam is the biggest, and it's not. And that's true with the United States too. And sometimes we get so caught up in our own little corner of the world. Hey, you know something else I did? Always, when we moved to a new place in particular, I would get a local map, you know? So we lived in Buffalo, New York for a while. So I had a map of Buffalo, and I hung it someplace where my kids could see it. A map of New York, hang it, that's our state. And then out, right? So every time we moved, we would do something like that. Someone asked, do any of, Sarah Jane on the app just now, do any of the high school levels have markable maps? So far we've done 300 and now on 400, but they're just on regular paper. I think the high school levels do, wow, now you're asking me that question, and I might need to get back with you on that. If you're buying it straight from Sonlight, I thought that the levels had these, but I wonder if they're just going through level J. And that's a good question. I need to re-look at that. No matter what though, Sarah, you can get the Markable Map, this big one, and put places on it yourself, okay? You can use a printed map like what I have up here as reference, or get yourself a handy dandy atlas, or use the internet, and they can find where it is and then mark it on their Markable Map. Okay, another thing to remember is that if you do levels, if you do our levels that have lap book, yes, lap books, so DE and GH, those lap booking kits often have map components with them, which are really fantastic. Different explorers' travels, you map them out. As the country, the United States, gains more territory, mapping out how it gained the territory through the Louisiana Purchase and all of that. Sunny's letting us know, yes, through level J, for colorful answer keys, parent guides have paper answer keys that provide answers for the blank maps in the student guide. So they don't have these laminated markable maps, but they do have the paper maps, and there's answer keys for you. That's right. I'm so sorry. I froze on that one, couldn't remember. But customers, if this is something you'd like to see in high school, let Sonlight know. That would be good for them to know. Okay, so philosophically, just saying, knowing where you fit in the world, for all of us to be culturally literate. Look, if you grew up in Europe, you grew up around a lot of countries, right? You can drive to so many countries easily. The United States, we're a little bit isolated, right? With just Canada and Mexico, and we kind of lose that sense of other countries and what's that like. But most of the other world lives close to each other and has this sense of knowing things. And I think if we're not super purposeful, we lose out on our understanding of the world. And we want to have intelligent, engaging conversations with people. And so having a basic understanding of the world, knowing some of the capitals of some of the big countries, things like that are really important. And I grabbed a Sonlight catalog before I came onto this live, and I thought, you know, Sonlight has top 10 goals. And one of those goals is raise children with God's heart for the world. It's hard to have a heart for the world when you never look at a map or anything. Another one was prepare your children to be winsome ambassadors. Again, hard to be a winsome ambassador for Christ when you have no interest and you have no knowledge about anything else outside of your own country. And mapping helps to create that curiosity. Another one of Sonlight's top 10 goals, raise culturally literate students. Again, this is cultural literacy. It is knowing where places are and having a basic understanding. So inspire students to be true scholars. Again, so important to know where places are. So those are some of the whys, and I'm so glad that you joined me. For a lot of you, you're just getting into the school year and things are gearing up, and see maps as your friend. It doesn't have to be, oh my word, we got to add on an hour a day for map work. It doesn't need to be like that. It can just be a joyful discovery, okay? Just a joyful discovery. Where is this place? How far would it take us to get there? Especially when your kids are little, because they love it. It brings it alive for them as they get older, and they're like, do I have to map? These are your friend. I was thinking one other thing, moms, along this line, you read a picture book to your little people, or even a book, And one of the things I started doing early on was like, who's the author? Oh, this book is by Make Way for Ducklings. This is by Robert McCloskey. And then we would look at the inside and see when it was written, right? So let's say Make Way for Ducklings was written in 40. Oh, Sweet Pea, do you realize your great-grandma was 6 years old when he wrote this book? Isn't that cool? Something like that. Just to, again, it's the same idea as a map, but putting something in a place, in a context. So fantastic. Well, I hope you're off to a great school year. If you have questions, again, that I didn't cover, or comments, something that you'd like to share, please drop it in the comments and I'll be notified. So if it's a question you have for me, Sunny's on here, other mentors will see it too. But I'll for sure see it since it's my live, and I'll see your comment and I can respond to it. Thank you for joining me. And I would like to pray with you before we stop, huh? God, thank you for these moms and maybe dads who've joined me today. God, thank you that we live in the United States. That's where we live, although I might have people on here live who are from all over the world. Thank you for wherever you've put us. And God, will you please help us to create an interest in our children for other places and in our own hearts for other places, and help us to do it for your honor and for your glory so that we can be winsome ambassadors. I love that phrase. Help us to be winsome ambassadors for you to people we meet and also to our own children, as the school year can sometimes get chaotic and long and it's easy to be cranky. Help us to be winsome. In your name I pray. Amen.